A very warm welcome to all of our attendees this morning. Just to start off, obviously, tips to continually prevent COVID-19. I wish we had a slide to give you some safety tips during these current riots that we are facing. So we hope you are all staying safe. So please ensure that you wash your hands regularly with soap and water. If you cannot do that, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze with a flexed elbow or a tissue and then throw the tissue into the bin, please. And then also clean and disinfect frequently touched objects and surfaces. This morning, we are discussing incident prevention because of COID that we discussed last week. Obviously, we want to work into, we don't really want to use COID, although we need you to have that. It is a legal requirement in order to ensure your letter of good standing is up to date with the Compensation Commissioner. But how do we prevent the usage of this type of insurance? Obviously, all of us have car insurance, we have home and household insurance, but none of us want to be robbed. None of us want to be hijacked for that insurance to actually come into place. Certainly, none of us want to have a car accident where we need to claim from insurance. And this should be the same attitude that we have toward health and safety. We shouldn't say, well, if somebody gets hurt, at least we have compensation. Although that is true, we want to do everything we can to prevent an incident or accident from occurring. Now, just before we get into this Toolbox talk, we want to please ask if any of you have had issues logging into our Toolbox talks. We do apologize, first of all. We have discussed this with the IT department to find out why it is some people have to re-log in or re-register for these Toolbox talks every morning. If you've experienced that and you're not experiencing it at the moment, please let us know. If you are still experiencing that and this morning you had to re-log in by ensuring that you register once again, please get in touch with us. We really do need to know this so that we can sort it out and make it as easy as possible for you to get into these sessions. Perhaps you know of somebody else, a friend, a colleague, or another plumber that had the same issues and they perhaps raised it with you. Again, get in touch with us. Let us try and get these email addresses from the people that want to be on these Toolbox talks. Again, we want to make it as easy as possible for you to receive them. If you have missed a few because of this situation, again, we do apologize, but you can find them on the IOPSA YouTube channel. Just go to IOPSA YouTube and look under Toolbox Talks and you will find most of the Toolbox Talks there since the past year. Well, let's get straight into our Toolbox talk then this morning. Incidents and accidents, they happen, but there kind of seems to be a bit of a saying that constantly comes out when I do chat to the plumbers. Well, what do you expect, Chris? It's bound to happen. And yes, we appreciate that incidents and accidents occur all the time. Now, they occur because of certain reasons, and that's what we want to discuss this morning. Because although incidents and accidents do happen, we can prevent a lot of the incidents and accidents that are currently happening from occurring again. So we don't want to have a negative light on the attitude of most out in the industry. We want to look at the positive side. And that's why we've decided to look at this Toolbox talk and see why incidents actually happen. And then let's look at some tips or some safety procedures that we should have in place in order to prevent them either from reoccurring, or perhaps you can see a potential incident or accident that could arise and you can take some sort of preventative or precautionary measures now so that it doesn't actually happen at all. Well, this way of thinking of what do you expect? It is bound to happen. Although that is a true statement, not every incident has to actually happen. And a very good saying is that safety doesn't happen by accident. We need to be prepared and have an active role, especially from management's perspective. So we want to ensure that we don't have a high incident rating. And here's 3 common observations that we have noticed for the reason behind the high incident rating or the reoccurrence of incidents that should actually be preventable. These are attitude, competence, and then lack of follow through. Now, let's look at each one of these. Attitude is a behavior. So we have things that we call unsafe acts and unsafe conditions. And this can be eliminated to a degree. There's certain unsafe acts and certain unsafe conditions that can be eliminated. And we're saying that as a fact Because after doing the incident investigation, we realized that one of these three things were actually behind the issue or the root cause. Now, an unsafe act is the performance of a task or other activity that is conducted in a manner that may threaten the health and safety of workers. So, for instance, we noticed climbing up on a ladder without hooking up when they get onto the roof. Most plumbers are getting into working at heights areas, such as on roofing, and what they are failing to do is ensuring 100% hookup at all time. Now, this is an unsafe act, but it could also become an unsafe condition through, again, our attitude. You see, an unsafe condition are hazards that have the potential to cause injury or death to an employee. And some of these are incorrect safety procedures, the malfunctioning of equipment and tools, failure to use necessary safety equipment. So when working at heights, we notice the employee has got a full body harness, but nowhere to attach it to. See, there's no anchor points. The fall protection plan has not been done correctly in order to identify where this employee should be hooking up. And generally what we find is it's a bit of a blame game, you see. And that's why we are saying the attitude towards safety. When we sit in some committees, we find out that the contractor is saying the employer, the client is responsible for doing this according to our contract. Basically, what they're saying is the contractor is not actually responsible for their own employees. Now, I do appreciate at sometimes it's a huge expense to install anchor points when it comes to lifelines and things like that on roofing, but this should all be done before the work even starts. And this is why it is so important before we even take on any scope of work, find out what the safety specifications are. Why not do a site inspection first before allowing your employees to get into an unsafe condition, and that leads them to now perform unsafe acts? There's a lot of employees who are too scared to say they refuse to work in an unsafe environment because their job is threatened. Now, this is an illegal act. This is victimization of the employee. They should be able to have the freedom to refuse unsafe work, but they cannot, because it's very easy for upper management to say you are easily replaceable. The unemployment rate is very high. You can be replaced very easily. Now, this type of attitude is what is causing such high incidents and accidents. And as we look around us in the country, falling apart around us, we seem to say, look at their attitude. Why do these people have this attitude? And yet we are reflecting a very similar one toward our employees within our health and safety compliance. So what attitude towards safety do you actually reflect? Do you have the know-how? Is competence a bit of an issue? And then what are your first actions after an incident? Do you automatically look for blame? Or are you looking for a solution in order to prevent it from happening again? And this is where these three things come in: your attitude towards safety, the competence that you have, the know-how, as well as the competence of your employees towards health and safety, and then following through. If there is an implementation of a safety system, is it just a safety file full of paperwork that you order, perhaps even from ourselves? You put the file down and then it just gathers dust. At least you have a file. You see, a file that is created, within a few days, it can become dead if it's not completed properly, if registers and checklists are not done, if procedures are not being followed, if all the documentation on a legal compliance requirement is not communicated and followed through. And all of this starts with management. The management have to be the driving force before a health and safety system. Then if an incident, an accident does occur, do we just write it off, get too busy, and not follow through on the active management plan to prevent an incident from reoccurring? Or we do need to ensure that we put enough time into it. So the attitude again comes in: if I hurry, I can go home early. Many people have this. We've seen now, across the board, a lot of people can actually work from home, which is a great thing. But are you becoming a little bit let's say, overconfident in your ability to do the works quickly instead of safely. And that's when incidents and accidents will start occurring. So you have the know-how, but you're just failing to listen or to think or to follow instructions or to put into practice the training you've received. Perhaps you know how to do it better. Well, if you found that, please let us know. Let us put it into the manual and send it into SAQA or SIOSH so that they can also implement that through training. But if it is not the safest way, then it's not a better way. So please remember, use your best safety device. Think before you act. Then also, with some of the plumbers that we've been working with, a few things that we've noticed is the unsafe manually handling, loading, stacking, and storing of materials. Now, this might be a little bit of a minor detail compared to the working at heights, working with electricity and soldering and welding, etc. But it is a 100% preventable incident and accident that we have noticed amongst the sites that we have visited. Because manually loading, offloading, or stacking of tools and materials can be done together. And yet what often happens is one person is left behind to do that while a few others watch. Now, this is not a very good attitude towards working as a team. So we noticed this and we just wanted to say, when you manually handle or load or stack or store any type of tool or material, please ensure that you do it in the correct manner. First of all, you want to ensure your ergonomics is done. So ergonomics is the comfort of the actual work and looking after your muscles and your skeleton in order to ensure you don't get sprains and strains or muscle pulls. So when you bend over, they always tell you to use your leg power to lift. Don't bend your back over to lift something. Obviously, try and bend your knees to get down to the lower level. Don't lift things that are too heavy. Yes, we know that many of you have strong muscles and you're going to gym, and that's important. And we encourage you to continue with your gym routine. But when it's at work, don't try and overload your body. You see, this is where incidents and accidents will then start occurring, or the breakdown of the body's muscles or even the joints that connect those muscles. See, it's one thing to have a very strong muscle, but if your joints are not strong, well, then that is what the muscle attaches to. And a chain is only as weak as its weakest link, or as strong as its weakest link. Now, overloading of platforms was another one. In this case, it was ladders. We noticed 2 to 3 people working on a ladder at a time. Well, again, a ladder is a one-person device. Only one person should be climbing up or down a ladder at any given time. Yes, you can have another person to 2 persons holding the ladder for you, stabilizing it while you're working on it. That is great, brilliant. Keep doing that. But you cannot have one person on the one side of an A-frame ladder and a person on the other side of the A-frame ladder and nobody holding it, having 2 people on this ladder. There is a safe working load. So please do not overload these platforms. Then also the incorrect use and abuse of plant and equipment. Most are driving forklifts at their offices. When we got to the warehouses, as soon as we arrived, they were quickly being told, please put your hard hat on. The safety guy is here. Now, if the attitude is that you are only supposed to wear safety equipment when the safety person is there, already you can see what is being trained in the employee's mind. And this is coming from the owners or managers. You see, as soon as we walk into the place, they're screaming orders or barking orders at each employee. Quickly, put your safety harness on. Make sure you put the strobe lights on the forklift. Quickly put your hard hat on. You see, that should automatically be done. It shouldn't wait for the auditor or the safety guy to come around before those orders are given. That should be done in the morning through a toolbox talk, a safety instruction, communication. And then it should also be done as a practice that you yourselves as managers are actually putting into place. Now, I'm not going to say that employees are children, but you know the old adage that children don't do what their parents say, they do what their parents do. Now, again, I'm not saying employees are children, but I'm saying the same concept will apply. If management walks on site and is not wearing their safety equipment, then employees will follow that example. Remember, managers, supervisors, you are there as an example to the employees. So if you are not following the safety standard, but you are telling your employees to do it, you are not carrying authority, or your message that you are trying to get across to your employees does not have any weight to it. And so, yes, they might put it on now while you are there because you become the safety guy, but they will refuse to put it on later. Now, when speaking to management, many of them say, yes, yeah, my employees do the same. They've got a bad attitude towards safety. Well, I corrected them very quickly and say, no, it's not your employees that have a bad attitude. You yourself are not setting the example for safety. You cannot be walking around a site without a hard hat and expect your employees to wear theirs. Now, most of the time they say, well, I'm not working, I'm not performing the tasks. Well, that doesn't really matter. You are in an environment where an incident or accident could occur. You have to ensure that you take the necessary precautions. And one very important one is when inspections are done on top of working at heights platforms. Please note, it doesn't matter whether you own the company or own the entire site. If you're climbing on that scaffold and accessing that roof, you have to ensure the correct fall protection is in place. Whether you are working on that roof or not, the requirement for working at heights is actually being on a level where you can fall. So if you are standing on a level where you can fall, you have to have fall prevention, fall restriction, or fall arrest in place. Not because you are working, but because you are in the area where the risk is. So again, use of faulty equipment or homemade repairs. And this is a very big one that we've noticed in a lot of ceilings. Geysers are not being installed correctly. A lot of maybe fly-by-night plumbers, and maybe you guys are having the same issues at the moment. We're doing a huge webinar on it coming up in this month. We're busy recording it at the moment. The importance of ensuring a competent plumber on site, because a lot of safety professionals perhaps don't know the plumbing safety standards. Now, we're not saying they are ignorant. It's just a health and safety professional knows the OSH Act, the regulations, and they can explain to you certain SAN standards or ISO standards. But a lot of them are not electricians. They're not plumbers. We know to a degree that certain things must be done safely. For instance, a plumber will have to dig a trench to lay a pipe. Well, that's good. A health and safety professional knows about trenches and excavations, dust, use of tools, use of power tools, use of pneumatic tools, and then even perhaps some of the scope of work that you're performing if they've got a bit of experience in working in that area. But if they don't, they're not too sure what type of piping you need for waste. Are you supposed to be using plastic? Are you supposed to be using steel? What type of plastic? What type of steel? What type of copper? You see, what thickness must it be? We see those specifics we actually don't know. So when it comes to electrical work, a health and safety professional will say, this electrical work has to be done according to SANS. However, because I don't know if you've done it correctly, you need to have it audited and issue with a COC, a certificate of compliance to me. And that's where we want to move the plumbing industry as well. We want them to see that you've been accredited, approved, so that when you've done your work, or even before you've done your work, you can show that you are a competent plumber by means of some sort of documentation, some sort of standard. And this is really something that we should take to heart and encourage our clients and contractors to know and understand, so that the use of faulty equipment or homemade repairs can be eliminated. You see, that type of thing can actually be eliminated completely. Let's take a look at the box on the right-hand side. 90% of all workplace eye injuries can be prevented, not maybe or could be. It says it can be prevented by wearing proper protective eyewear. That means out of 10 people who have perhaps lost their sight due to an occupational injury, 9 of them were preventable. That is a staggering amount of incident and accident statistics that can be preventable that is not being prevented. Now, what about the cutting off of limbs, the spilling of hazardous chemical substances, the damage to our lower backs because of incorrect manual handling, or the falling of tools from a higher level, perhaps a ceiling, a ladder, a scaffold, a roof, down to a lower level where people are being hurt constantly every single day? Can this be eliminated? Well, of course it can, because we need to have the right procedures in place, the right attitude, the right competency, and the follow through to ensure that we not just prevent it from occurring again, but actually eliminating it altogether. So what is the outcome of incidents and accidents? Well, for one, the cost of these are a lot higher than just money. You see, the cost of an incident and accident will also include things like pain, suffering. Perhaps if there is a fatality of a person, what does the family get left with? Ongoing disability for some. It can also result in the loss of earnings. For many who have an incident or an accident, if they are found guilty of an offense according to Section 37.1 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, maybe they are let off work and then they lose their entire job completely. Perhaps they are off for too long a period of time. They've already taken sick leave and annual leave and now need to take unpaid leave. You see, COID will assist you, but if you don't know how to claim from COID, how are you going to be able to compensate yourself from losing this type of earning? What about returning to work and now you are incapable of performing that job due to some sort of disability? Well, now the parameters of your contract may have to change. Or perhaps the inability to support your family because you weren't able to continue working. Now, employers you will also face financial or time costs in compensation, loss of work time, loss of management time, especially if you are carrying out correct investigations. Perhaps even if the Department of Labor comes in and finds that you were negligent in accordance with Section 37 not being implemented, then you could face a possible fine from the Department of Labor. So we need to really stop before starting any work. We need to think and act on follow through on the incidents and accidents that we face. So here's 8 incidents and accidents that can occur in and around your workplace that we'd like you to have the right attitude toward. Educate yourself, and if you need more information, please reach out so that we can give you the information needed for this. And then we're asking you to please follow through on the prevention of these incidents and accidents. Overexertion. When an object is too heavy to be lifted, pushed, pulled, held, carried, or thrown. This results in sprains, strains to ligaments, muscles, tendons in the neck and back. Fall on the same level. This occurs when a worker slips, trips, or falls on a relatively level surface or object like floors, stairs, or ramps, and injuries can include concussions, contusions, fractures, abrasions, and lacerations. Now, what about struck by an object or piece of equipment? These accidents occur when a worker is hit by a moving object and can result in injuries ranging from cuts, bruises, paralyzation to death. A fall to a lower level, one of the highest or the second or third highest incident ratings for death that is currently happening in our construction industry, is a fall to a lower level. This kind of accident happens when a worker falls from height, such as a ladder, scaffold, roof, toward a level below them, and often results in broken bones, spinal cord injuries, traumatic brain injuries, and obviously even death. Then struck against an object or a piece of equipment. These injuries occur when a worker is hit by a stationary object. They can cause broken bones, concussions, contusions, lacerations, and more. Caught by equipment or in between equipment, when a worker goes unnoticed by those operating heavy machinery or equipment, they can easily be trapped or crushed. This often results in injuries like amputations, organ damage, and internal bleeding. Repetitive motion injuries, coming back to our ergonomic side, when a worker is required to perform the same movement or action over and over again. The wear and tear that the affected body parts endure can be damaging. Injuries from repetitive motions often include things like tendonitis, bursitis, and carpal tunnel. Now, if you are working at a good gym routine, you would know that you cannot do upper body or like chest 3 or 4 days in a row. You'd probably do it once, let's say on a Monday, and then you would leave it for 2-3 days, and you would start again maybe on a Thursday, depending on how your gym routine is, because you cannot do the same muscle groups over and over again in such a short consecutive time, because it eventually ends up in damaging it. So you're not going to build muscle, you're going to damage muscle. It's the same with our work. If you are doing the exact same thing every single day, either you need to take more regular breaks from that, or change the way it is being done to substitute it, perhaps move it to a different place, introduce some sort of equipment or personal protective equipment in order to assist your body with those repetitive motion injuries. Then highway accidents. Now, these incidents occur in occupations where employees are working alongside a road, such as public service, emergency response, construction workers, and these incidents can be severe and in some cases fatal. Please ensure, if you are working in high traffic areas, be on guard. Please ensure you have your correct working in traffic or traffic management plans in place. And again, don't let it be a dead document. It shouldn't be something that is just in the safety file. It should be something that is in the hearts and minds of your employees to know and understand. So here's a few things that we want you to please do with attitude, competence, and follow through. Always be alert. Wear your required safety gear. Pay attention to the task you are doing. And as employees, insist upon proper training, both from a legal perspective, SAQA-based, and in-house training. Don't rush your work, especially at the end of the day. Follow instructions, follow emergency drills, and be safe. So thanks very much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. One of the incidents and accidents that we would like to speak about a little bit more is hot works. We're going to discuss why this is so dangerous, especially when working in ceilings or perhaps even with thatch roofing, where there's a possibility for fire to break out. We will then end up the month with training management. What can we do to institute a good training management program within our company? So thank you very much once again for joining us.